Hey, welcome to another episode of Linked Insomnia. Today I have Angela Choi, and today we're going to talk about how to discover and live your purpose. How's everything, Angela?
Things are going well. Thanks so much for having me, Junaid.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things we met, what was it, a year ago, right? When was that? It was in the
Yes,
summer. No,
it
over a year ago.
was. Yes, I think a little over a year, maybe like a year and a half ago at that alumni event.
Wow. And have you been, that was your first one, was that your first one, or you go to a couple? That was my first one
Um,
of that type.
yeah, that was my first one of that type. I mean, I've been to a couple where you help out, and I'm trying to think. I went to my reunion, but that was
Yeah,
the first one of its type. Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. No, it's cool. So, FYI, for those of you in the audience who are joining us, Angela, so you graduated which year?
Oh eight.
You know what's interesting? It's like you could go to the same school, and then yet you forget that you saw the person and or whatever, right?
I mean, it was a really big school. I mean, we were 1 year apart, but there's so many of us. It was kind of hard for me to imagine that, what was it, like 2,500 people walk through the same doors every day. I feel
Yeah,
like I had a good sense of everyone in my
I
class,
think
but
by
that's
us it
about
was
it.
like almost 3,000 because it
Almost.
started getting bigger, right,
Yeah.
during my year and the year after. Yeah, no, it is crazy. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you know, it's funny when I went to my high school reunion. There were some people I had no idea. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen you. I was like, who are you? And it was cool. It was interesting talking to them.
Yeah, I had one or two of those cases. Most people I knew, it was a good mix. So it was like either, wow, I recognize you, you look exactly the same, or like, wow, I don't recognize you at all. And then the third one was like, wow, I don't think we've ever crossed paths before. So people
Yeah.
either fell in one of the three
See,
categories.
I recognize people who, I was, whatever, they may have changed how they look and all that stuff, grown beards and all that stuff. But there were some people, it was surprisingly a decent amount because I was like, I thought I knew everybody, but I was like, wow, I did not see you. And I felt bad. But it's just interesting how you could be in similar worlds. So, can you sort of give a background of yourself? So now you're a career coach and you kind of help people discover and live their purpose. How did you sort of
Mhm.
fall into this, and what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so I am an international life purpose and career coach, and I help professionals who feel stuck or unfulfilled to discover their purpose so that they can have both the impact and the income that they want, and that so that they can create lives that they love, both in and outside of work. And the work that I do stems from my own personal experiences of trying to find my purpose in the last, I would say, 10 years or so across different industries and functions in the corporate, startup, nonprofit worlds in the US and Asia, Africa, Europe. And while I was doing this, trying to find my purpose, I was also dealing with self judgment, familial pressure, societal expectations, and with all the experiences and lessons that I've gained throughout the last 10 years, now I want to share that with the world and help people who may be going through similar challenges. So that's where my work stems from.
That's interesting. So, was there a specific moment in your career where you like found your passion, and how was that like for you?
Yeah, someone asked me the other day, oh, did you have an aha moment? And I was like, I wish I had an aha moment because I feel like there are people who do have those aha moments. But for me, I feel like I had a string of aha moments across like the last 10 years, right? So I don't think it was one particular incident where I discovered, oh, this is my purpose. It was more like what Steve Jobs had once described in his commencement speech, that you can only connect the dots going backwards, right?
Mm,
And for me, like throughout my journey, it was always just following the next thing that felt right. Or anytime I felt like there was a particular interest that I had, I'd be like, I want to go explore this. So it was always like following the breadcrumbs. And that's led me to where I am today.
no, I think you bring up a great point of this like breadcrumb thing, because a lot of times you think like, hey, I'm gonna have a moment where I like figure things out, and it's really like you figure a little out, you figure some breadcrumbs, you get some things here and there, and and you really only connect the dots. Was like, wow, that was when. I realized when it wasn't for me. I mean, like for me personally, I think like it's not like I hated working corporate. It's just like I felt like it wasn't enough, right? I was like,
Mm,
it's not satisfying. It's not like what I want to do. I mean, some people really value like the stability. Because look, I will say like corporate, you have the stability, you have the predictability, but for me, that for certain people in certain phases of their life or certain personalities, right, that's what they want. But for me, it just wasn't satisfying. Like I cared more about like the impact, and plus I hate mornings, so that
yes.
like definitely contributed to it. But I needed like a startup. I needed where I was active and being able to make impact. Because I remember like when I worked corporate, it's like all my free time I just spent working on no degree. Like I would be looking up career advice, I'd be looking up all that stuff, and it's like now it's like I like that it's a part of my job, right? And
Yeah.
it did take a long time though. It's not easy to make the transition.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think what you said is absolutely true. There are people who do appreciate the corporate lifestyle and the stability and the structure and working with colleagues in the same space. Like there are people who thrive in that type of environment. And I quickly realized that that wasn't for me. And I've always loved helping people one on one, interacting with people. And I also think generally speaking, I'm too free spirited for the
Yeah,
corporate world. Like I want to dress the way I want to dress. I want to express myself the way I want to. And I kind of felt like when I was in the corporate world, I had to put on a separate identity, right? Like this is
yeah,
Angela in the corporate world, and then this is Angela outside of work. And I actually think that leads to, personally for me, fragmentation, and I
yeah.
want to have a whole and complete identity. So,
No,
yeah, I definitely agree with you.
I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, I want to tell this person how it is, but I gotta say, per my last email, if you were looking, I said XYZ. So it's definitely, I can definitely see that. I mean, for me, it's like I was definitely like, even in the corporate world, I was a free spirit, right? I mean, look, I made sure to do my work and stuff, but I also was like kind of my own person. But there's only so free you can be, right? Because there are some limitations, and you still have to sort of, abide by some of the rules. And I do kind of see that a lot of free spirits, what probably happened to you, is you question why. Like, why is it this way? Why do we have to have this? Why do we have to have these rules? I remember, like, I read funny stories online. It was on Reddit, and it was like, what was one of the stupidest work policies you've ever seen? It was like, you can't look outside the window, and they worked in a glass building. And then it's like, why?
That's absurd.
So so I can imagine you kind of saying why. Was there anything like anyone or any few moments that really stuck out to you? Like, hey, this isn't for me. Like, this is not what I'm about when you're working.
Yeah, there were a couple of there were a couple of moments. So I was working in consulting, and there was a feeling. I was looking at people around me, and the general feeling that I got was that people didn't feel very inspired by the work. I felt people were there because they had been accustomed to a certain lifestyle, or they had reached a certain position within the firm. And when I looked at them, I didn't feel inspired, as in like, oh, that's not where I see myself. Like, I think you, I talk a lot about purpose. I feel that already at that point in my life. Like, what is the purpose of doing this? Like, I can't imagine myself in their shoes. And they talk about like the golden
Yeah,
handcuffs a lot, right? Like, once you make a certain amount of money, it's harder to leave because you have a certain lifestyle. And I was always very aware of that, aware of not falling into that trap. And I think the other thing for me was just day in and day out, it was the same thing over and over again. And this was my first job out of college. So I feel like there was a bit of, it was really hard for me to grapple with how in college you're really encouraged to pursue your intellectual curiosities, like anything you want to study, anything you want to research, you can just do it for the sake of doing it. And I needed a college degree to get the job that I had, but I felt like the job that I had didn't actually necessitate a degree or the type of work that I was doing. And the fact that I was just doing the same things day in, day out, moving Harvey balls around and PowerPoints, and it just didn't feel meaningful for me. And I feel like that feeling was exacerbated having come from this environment where I was encouraged to explore, to try new things, to learn things for the sake of learning things. And really, the language that I used back then was that I felt like my brain and my soul were rotting. So it
Wow.
was like
No,
a
that's
string of these
powerful.
moments of feeling that. Yeah.
Now, do you feel like college kind of gives you the misconception? Because I think a lot of people like college is sort of a bubble, and you kind of think like, yeah, it's all about these ideas and this and that, and then you kind of go into a workplace, and it's like it's it's so different, right? That it's kind of like what, like you're because. And it's going to vary, right? It's going to vary by place to place. It's going to vary by department to department. But in general, in a corporate setting, unless you're in a very startup, right, your ideas are not to encourage, right? I remember being in meetings and it was you listen to whoever had the highest title. Really, that's the only opinion that mattered, right? And sometimes you had the freedom to say, but it didn't matter. If they wanted something, that's it, right? And it's did you experience a lot of that?
So, when I think about college, looking back now, I feel like in some ways I was very inadequately prepared for what they call the real world, which I'll just call the working world.
Yeah.
So I feel like I think what I got from college is learning how to think critically, learning how to write, learning how to express my opinions. I mean, that's what you get when you go to a liberal arts school. But the things that you learn on the job, I wish I had more knowledge about that. So things, I mean, even simple things like how to what to do with your 401k, how to deal with office politics, how to write a formal email to someone, how to manage meetings. I mean, you end up learning that on the go, right, as you're doing it. But like these are skills that I wish that they taught in college. I mean, I think it's different. So if you go to a business school for undergrad, there's definitely more emphasis on things like that. But I don't think that
I
college
would just I
generally.
don't even think even in a business school it's really like that because this is like one thing I hated about college was I hated group projects because this and I'm gonna tell you why, because what happens is you get four people, four, five, one or two people just don't care, and the two people who care about their grades have to like pick up the slack for these two or three people that don't. And I've seen it. Doesn't matter which school, doesn't matter Ivy League, doesn't matter community college. It's always the same. So, and like trust me, like I've seen it, and it's always sort of the same. Where it's like you don't have actual meetings, you don't have work meetings and all that stuff. You don't have any of those things. You don't have like you have the project deadlines, but there's no salary tied to it. And then
Hmm.
some people they're like, oh, if I fail, I fail. Whereas like you're like, oh, if I fail, my parents are gonna, or whatever, I'm gonna get held back. So I don't think even in a business school, a lot of it's like theory, right? A lot of it's like abstract theory, but the real world is just different. And it differs by company to company too.
Yeah, when you mentioned people not doing their part in group projects, that just brings back so many memories of wrong science where I was just like super nerdy and sometimes put with people who didn't want to pull their weight, and it was just a nightmare. So
Oh
I
man, group
remember that
projects.
in high
if
school.
if I ever taught, I would never assign group projects. And the thing is, the teachers and professors are always so unhelpful. They're like, "Oh, work it out." Like you tell them, "Hey, this person's not doing their work." "Oh, just work it out." It's like, what do you mean? If the guy does not want to do their work, I can't force him to. It always happens that way.
Yeah, no, I fortunately I didn't have that experience in college, but I've had. I'm thinking back now. Like I've done some projects like post college, and I think it's actually a good way to flex what people would call your leadership skills. So
Yeah,
like, how do you actually get to the root cause of like why someone's not working? Like, how do you motivate someone? So I think that there are things for both parties to learn,
yeah,
like the
agreed.
person who's trying to do the convincing and the person who's not pulling his, her, or their weight.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think. it's a little too early to introduce it in the sense of they didn't give you the tools to like tell you how to deal. Like it's one thing.
Yeah.
You especially in college, you put someone in that situation, and they kind of, it's good that they learn, but you don't give them the tools to equip. Like, hey, this is how you motivate someone. This is how you consensus. This is how you negotiate. Like, if you gave
Yeah.
people those tools and then put them in, I think it's much more powerful. And even the sad thing is, in the workplace, it's the same too. You sort of have to figure it out,
Yes.
or you have to go self-study or read a book and then figure out, oh, this is how I deal with this conflict.
Yeah, I think I mean, there are two things I want to say in response. So the first is just the importance of soft skills and EQ. And that's definitely, I feel like there's more of an awareness of the importance of those two things now, but it's definitely something that's not emphasized. You're absolutely right. Like usually in school, they're just teaching you theories, or even in business school, like case studies, right? So I do think that being able to teach those things, like how to work in a group, how to lead a group, how to work with someone who's not collaborative or doesn't agree with you, like how do you work that out? I think that's really important. I think the second thing about all of this is that, I mean, if you're in a group project and someone's not pulling his or their weight, it's like, why are they there in the first place? Like, what is their motivation, or why is there a lack of motivation? Which kind of goes back to purpose. It's like, if people knew what their purpose was, then they would feel more motivated to do the things that they do. So like this, I mean, I think when we think about college, like, do people really understand why they're going to college or what they want to get out of college? Like, I think this is something that's really important for younger folks to think about. Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
What do I want to do with my degree? What do I want to get out of this experience?
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a great point. And so you went to Yale undergrad, right? Did you get your master's?
Yeah.
You went to
I didn't get my master's.
Okay, so you went to Yale undergrad, and I will say that, like, I went to both Queens College and Columbia, so obviously I've seen both environments. So obviously at a place like Yale, everyone's at least motivated to be there, or their parents are so strict that they have no option but to be there, right? So when I was in Columbia, right, most people they were there for a reason, XYZ, and it was a master's program, so they were more direct. But when I was at Queens College, there were some people who were purely there, right, because their parent, like, they just had to be there, and and that's it. Like, I remember there was some class, like, I remember one class I had, this kid showed up late. If he showed up late every day, and he left early. And it was a summer class. It was like one of the easiest summer classes. Open book midterm, open book final, multiple choice. It was so easy, right? Money and money and banking or something like that, 208 or something. And during the final, he went to the professor. He was like, "Oh, professor, I didn't take the midterm." And the professor was like, "What?" And the professor was still nice enough that he was like, "All right, during the final, I'll let you take the midterm, but you have to get above a certain grade on the midterm to be eligible for the final, because it's an average." So you gotta read. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
He obviously had no purpose, right? I don't even know what he was doing in school, but I think it's very important to have that purpose and to have that why, right? And I think because some people are just to be there, and then so if they're just there to be there, and if they're there, they don't care about the end result. Whereas, like, if some people are there to get a job, some people are there to learn, right? You can kind of see the differences in how they act and their motivations.
Absolutely. And also, I feel like when you don't really know why you're there, that feeling of not knowing, or this like aimlessness, follows you, right? It's
Yeah,
like, so you're done with college, like, what do you do next? Do you know? Not, maybe not, because you haven't explored. Oh, you went offline.
I'm offline.
Oh.
No,
It's
no.
so awesome. I love everyone who's commenting. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
commenting and being here. I'm
yeah.
like,
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, thank you, Benjamin. Nice to see you. We got to catch up. Thank you, Reba. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining. Thanks everyone for joining. And I think you're right, because people who don't have purpose, they think kind of changing, like, it's like trying to change the exterior, right? Like, they're trying to change their clothes and thinking that their clothes will make them happy, but really, same thing. You think you're gonna switch your job and be happy. You think you're gonna switch. Sometimes you can switch your job and be happy, but they think switching the outside but they're not going after like the root cause, right? It's like sort of taking like a pill to sort of cure your headache when you're not working on the things that are actually causing your headache. So because I've seen so many people, they think like,
Yeah.
hey, if I just switch my job, I'll be happy and things will be okay. And then what happens is you're happy for the first month, you're happy month 2, you're still okay month 3, and then by month 6, same thing, right? You start you don't like the people anymore, you don't like the work, you don't like
Yes.
that. And again, it's a pure lack of purpose, because it's like once you have the purpose, those other things, while they do help, they're more of details, right?
Yeah, I think you touched on something that's really important. So, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to live on purpose, right?
Yeah,
And I feel like, our jobs and our careers make up a big part of our purpose.
yeah,
But I also feel like purpose encompasses more than our jobs and our careers. It's like our way of being and who we are and how we're contributing to our families, our communities, and our workplaces, right? And what I mean by contribution is really tapping into the unique gifts and talents, experiences, and perspectives that we bring to the table to contribute to all of these places, right? And when we feel like we're contributing with our unique gifts and talents, it's like you're able to find the sense of contentment and fulfillment that is hard to find elsewhere, right? So it's like coming within from you, right? So it doesn't matter where you are, you just feel it, and you don't need external things to make you feel full. You feel content from the inside out. And that's why purpose, or having an understanding of your purpose, is so important.
so do you see a lot of people, they kind of go to look for external solutions to like internal problems? Do you kind of see that happen a lot?
I think that, well, I think we all are
Yeah,
guilty of this to a certain extent, right? And I mean, who doesn't like entertainment? Who doesn't scroll on social media? Who doesn't mindlessly snack? I think we're
yeah,
all guilty to a certain extent of all these things, right? And that's like kind of filling the void and like
yeah.
numbing the emptiness, right? I think that what is more prevalent is not so much um, seeking external things, but convincing ourselves that like everything's okay.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is like if we're really honest with ourselves, I think that we're all afraid of certain things, right? People will think of me, and because I have these fears, I'm not even going to explore what it is that I actually really want or like would love to chase. So I'm going to convince myself that I'm content here, that like everything is okay here. But like you can't deny what your heart knows. That's where the feelings of discontentment come out, and eventually it's going to burst, or you're just going to be living a life of lies.
so when you're working with your clients, right, what are some signs that someone is discontent?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are pretty standard. People dreading Mondays, really looking forward to Fridays. Like, usually, like, I don't like what I'm doing, but I don't know what to do. So I'm just here writing it out. Those are pretty common ones.
What are some uncommon ones? Like, what are some subtle things that kind of like where people will convince themselves that it's okay, but when you dig deeper, you realize like, hey, there is this fragmentation, or there is this issue that they're facing. That's, again, sometimes it may take years for it to come out, right? That sometimes it's a 10, they may only realize it looking back at 10 to 15 years. So what are some of the breadcrumbs in this
Yeah.
scenario?
Well, usually by the time people come to me, they have already a level of self-awareness
Yeah.
where they are aware that like something's not working. So I haven't worked with anyone who hasn't been aware of that something's not working. Sometimes,
Okay.
even when people like, there are people sometimes who can't quite pinpoint it. It just feels like something is missing. Like I hear that.
Mm.
Like, you know, something feels like it's missing in my life.
So,
I don't know what
like,
it
let's
is.
say you were able to, like, what if a client wasn't self-aware, right? Like, would you have been able to get those clients maybe earlier if through some, like, if you got those clients earlier, would it even be right for them to talk to you, or they're coming to you at the right time, or are they coming to you too late? Because sometimes when you're
It's
self-aware,
never
right?
too
That's
late.
okay.
It's never too late. You could be 100 years old and still looking for your purpose. It is never
Well,
too late.
not that I mean that they're coming to you too late to find their purpose, in that they should have came to you ideally earlier. That's what I mean.
Mm, yeah, that this is where I think like my spiritual side comes in. Everything that I feel like everything that happens in our lives happen for a reason. Like you're exactly where you're meant to be. So even if your ego mind or, feels like it's late because feel like you should have realized this sooner, you had to have gone through that experience to get to the point where you are now. So I don't think that it's late in that sense. I think that people figure things out when they're meant to figure things out. Like you
Yeah.
can't force growth or evolution at the pace that it's meant to be.
Okay.
Is my belief.
No. I think that's a great perspective, and it has a lot of truth to it. So Reba asked, like, how do you sort of get clients, and do you, like, how does that sort of work? Like, how do people sort of find you? Like I'm a person.
Yeah.
I want to find my purpose. How do I know to find you?
Yeah. So usually it's through my network or people. So people I know or people who have mutual connections, and then also just external marketing. So putting myself out there, doing things like this, just getting my name out there.
Yeah, I think Reba, that's the same way. If you have to put yourself out, like you have
For
to put
sure.
yourself out there, or you have to have some connection somewhere, all right? Which typically
Yes.
requires putting yourself out there in some capacity. So,
Yes.
you mentioned, and we'll probably say it at the end, that you're doing like a coaching giveaway.
Yeah, so I'm currently having a 3-month one-on-one coaching giveaway, which actually closes tonight. So if you're interested, it's 3 months of coaching with me where we work together to gain clarity on your purpose and what matters to you, what makes your heart sing, what brings you joy, right? And through that process, we also we uncover your gifts and your talents, because everyone has unique gifts and talents, but we just don't recognize that or see that in ourselves because of all of the comparisons that we make with against other people. So we work to uncover and cultivate your unique gifts, and in the process also work through limiting beliefs, self-doubt, self-criticism, like the two things that usually hold people back. And then without those limitations, like dreaming big, like what do you want your life to look like? What would you do if you didn't have these fears? And then creating an action plan and taking small, consistent steps to get there. So that's what my coaching program entails. I'm having a giveaway. I'm going to announce a winner later this week. So if you're interested, feel free to visit my website, angelachoy.co/giveaway.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just put that in the chat. AngelaChoi.co/giveaway.
Thank you.
I hope. Okay, good. Got it. Wow, you got
Yeah.
AngelaChoi.co. I wonder who has the .com. It's
I
tough.
think I don't think it was available. I think it was just taken, but there was nothing on the site.
Yeah, that's common. They typically take
Yeah.
like common names. Thankfully, I have Janai.com. I got lucky. I have Janai.com and I have
Yay.
Janai.com. So I got lucky.
Yeah.
So we kind of have an idea of what happens when you don't know your purpose, right? We know the state of mind, just contentment, there's fragmentation, there's all that. Now, how does it look like when after someone finds their purpose, right? So, and there's probably two stages, right? You sort of find your purpose, because you mentioned an action plan, because there's probably like you found your purpose, and now it's like you've sort of developed an actual route. So what is that when you found your purpose? What kind of changes do you see in people when they've just found their purpose?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I want to say is that the quest to find our purpose is what I believe to be a forever journey, right? Because I think that like the essence of who we are stays the same, but maybe the expression of our essence may change throughout our lifetime and even from one year to the other, right? So that is to say, like you may be doing, like for example, nodegree.com, you may be doing this now, but 10 years down the road, you may be expressing yourself and living your purpose through another means or
Yeah,
avenue, right? So that being said, when people are on the path towards their purpose, they're in this state of flow, right? So, you know that feeling when you enjoy something so much that when you're doing it and you look up and an hour has passed, but for you, it's felt like 10 minutes, right? That's when
yeah,
you know that you really enjoy what you're doing and you're really ingrained in what you're doing, right? So people feel that way, right? I think a common one is not dreading Mondays. I mean, there are people who get very anxious on Sunday just thinking about the fact that they have another week of the same thing that they just went through the previous week, right? So, like, feeling calm about Monday, feeling excited about Monday, like not seeing a difference between Monday or Friday. They're the same because you enjoy the work that you do. So, there's no difference between whether it's the start of the week or the end of the week, right? Like, not living to look forward to the weekends, like enjoying your life every single day as it is.
okay. I mean, that's great. So you have the sort of enjoying every day. What else do you find in their personal, like, does their personality change? Are they a better version of themselves? Their outlook on life? What other things do you commonly see?
Yeah, because the thing is, like, we're not siloed beings, right? Because the thing is, when people are stressed out at work or if they're not enjoying their work, that bleeds into other areas of their life, right? Or like if again, when people are not in alignment with their purpose, another thing is that they're just exhausted from work, right? Like they're tired, they don't have energy. But imagine if you enjoyed what you did, you would have energy, you would feel excited, and that feeling blends into and bleeds into other areas of your life. Like if you're, upset at work, if you're angry at work, like the way that you treat people, like that's gonna bleed over to other areas. So yes, definitely there is impact because we're not siloed beings.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so right. Like, oftentimes you can tell when someone has had a bad day from something else because they're just different in how they treat, and that's why it's very important to sort of, I think, especially for managers, because a lot of times, like, they don't have they don't have immediate repercussions for sort of taking it out on their team. But what ends up happening is long term, they sort of create a culture where, people do dread Mondays and they do dread the work and they're not
Yeah.
really fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where the EQ and the soft skills come in. I think that that's so important to be able to lead in a way where people feel inspired to work with you, people want to work with you, right? I think that's really important.
Yeah. Now, so I know you're doing like two workshops in December. Can you sort of share that?
Yeah, so in December, December 6th and December 10th, I'm partnering with different organizations in New York. One is called Heal House, the other is Minka. And I run workshops where I go in depth about what we're talking about. So, what does it mean to live our purpose? What are the things, the roadblocks that are getting into people's way of tuning into their purpose? And then what are the three ways that we can uncover our purpose? So that's what I usually go through in my workshops. If there's maybe I can drop a link later, or
Yeah.
can I drop it in? Maybe I can
Yeah,
drop it in
send me in
now.
the private chat and I'll drop it in
Okay,
the thing. So yeah,
cool.
just feel free to drop the link. So
Yeah.
now, what are some common things that you kind of see? Because you mentioned roadblocks. What are some common roadblocks that people have from sort of getting closer to their purpose?
Yeah. So again, what I mentioned to you before, fear gets in the way a lot, right? Uh, Fear of failure, fear of judgment from other people. And from my personal experience, I mean, when you think about it, self-judgment, familiar pressure, and societal expectations, it's like all of these external voices telling you like what you should be doing. And then at some point, I think we internalize that, right? So there's some of that going on. And again, I had mentioned before that I think it's so important for people to uncover their talents, their gifts, right? And people, sometimes it's not easy for people to do that because they don't feel like they offer anything different from what other people offer, right? So it's like really tapping into yourself and seeing what you offer to this world, that like there isn't another Joniad like you. There isn't another Angela like me. We have such different lived experiences, and that shapes who we are, the perspectives that we bring, how we approach problems. And like I think most people don't see that.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Like even twins lead different lives, right? And they're literally
Yeah.
right as close as it can, as you know, people can be, and even then they'll have different. I mean, they'll look similar, right? But you know, like I read stories about like people who have like significant others that are twins, and they can tell them apart, right? Like they just know. So same thing. Like people can sense, right, that you're different in you know your own unique way. Now
Yes.
you mentioned that there are a lot of things society, you know, like so what are you mentioned, can you go like a little more in depth? So there's like the familiar pressures, like what's common that you kind of see in that, and then we'll kind of go to the
Yeah.
society pressures.
So I'll speak for my own family, and I think that this also resonates with the Chinese American community, and I would say Asian American community at
Yeah.
large, especially coming from an immigrant family. Um, Money, make
Oh yeah,
lots of
that's
money and
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
a lot of stability. And you mean, I can't blame my family for thinking that way because, they sacrifice a lot to come to a new country where they don't speak the language, right? So for them, success means having stability, having a lot of money, right? Um, and it's like their lived experiences shape how they view the world, and my lived experiences shape how I view the world, right? So I want to live a certain way, but what they think is right for me is not what I think is right for me. But it's hard not to factor in what they think when I recognize all that they've done for me, right? It's like that's familial pressure. I think in regards to societal expectations, for me personally, having gone to a school like Yale where, people are, I think, expected to follow certain paths or like continue going on to like Harvard Business School or
Yeah.
Harvard Law School, or like when you're surrounded by people who are doing those things and feeling like, if I wanted to, I could do that too, but then I don't think I want to do that. So feeling like, oh, I think I want to walk down a different path, but I could follow that path, right? So again, it's something that I created in my own head because no one's like, Angela, that's what you have to do. But there's this feeling of like, that's what I should be doing because that's what people around me are doing. And if I wanted to, I think I could do it. So why am I not doing that?
No, I think it's very important, especially like you know I went to the Ivy League, you went to the Ivy League. It's you know what I've always found is right in especially you know going to a place like Bronx Science, you always kind of idolize right going to an Ivy League, you idolize the people in it, and like as they're you know they're changing the world and all that. But you know sometimes I think it's like you go to an Ivy League, you end up working as a consultant, or you work at you know like a company like Goldman Sachs, and all you end up doing is just returning money to shareholders, and you're really not causing an impact. I don't know. I find it's like so glorified to the point where it is dangerous, right? Where it's like a lot of times it's our own, right? It's ourselves who think like we have to make this amount of money, we have to work in this career, but oftentimes, you know, I think you're contributing more value than any investment banker, right? You're helping, you know, people sort of really change their lives.
Thank you. So I actually have a lot to say about the whole Ivy League thing. I
Yeah,
never even before, I would say I only defined schools based on Ivy League when I was in high school, right?
yeah,
Because that was the type of environment that we were in. But once I got into college, I never understood this whole hype with the Ivy League thing. I mean, my understanding was that the Ivy League was formed for like football reasons many,
Yeah,
many
yeah, it's a
years
football
ago,
league,
right? So
and they're not even good
that's
at it. It's kind of like, kind of, I don't know. That it's kind of funny.
so that's the first thing. The
Yeah,
second thing I feel about college admissions in general, or like top schools or good schools or whatever you want to label it, right? I just feel like well, getting into an institution like Yale is a crapshoot because there are so many people who are qualified who apply and don't get in, and they're equally as smart and capable,
yeah,
if not more, right? So, like, getting into a school like that doesn't define a person. And I don't think, I think what it actually means is that, like, the people who get in, like, know what boxes to check off to,
yeah,
appeal to admissions officers. I don't think it actually means anything. And I feel like it puts a lot of, I mean, I was talking to a friend who went to Yale, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on people to feel like they need to live up to this expectation of having gone to such schools. I mean, like I mentioned to
yeah,
you, I felt it.
yeah. You know, it's funny. It's like because I was on a wrestling team, and there were some people, and you saw all these organizations. I think what was there was one that everybody joined for the volunteer, Arista, right? I can't believe that's. You know, it's funny. I haven't heard that word in like 10 years, and it just came back into my mind. And it's funny because I remember people choosing activities purely based on like what looks good on the application, what gives you the most amount of credit hours per time. Because I remember for wrestling, anybody who did it purely for college, they quit because they're like, oh, I could just join the track team because it's so much easier, and they have shorter practices. And it was kind of sad that people like they define especially a crucial time in your life, right? High school is a crucial time in terms of development, social development, and they kind of just chose it based on what a school would say. Like I and it was just really sad that people just chose their activities based on like what looks good, and they would do so much busy work because Arista says you have to do this many hours, and it's like at some point it's just like, is it worth it? And I'm glad I got to choose what I wanted, because at some point I was like, I mean, me, it's like, yeah, look, obviously I want to get in, but if I didn't get in, it wasn't the end of the world. And, it sucks. I remember there was one kid in our school, in some school, I think at Bronx Science, he got into he applied to like the 16 top schools, and he got into like 15 of the 16. I think he didn't get into like Yale or something like that. And it's just funny. It's like, well, he's obviously qualified because if 15 others accept it, like what they don't realize is, look, maybe the admissions officer at Yale had an ex-girlfriend named Angela that he hated, and he's like, no, I can't have like a lot of people don't realize that it's people are biased, and
Yeah.
and I've seen that so much. And there was a kid in our school who graduated over the summer. He paid, his parents paid $6,000 for a college essay.
To
Yeah.
have someone write it, or
So at that point, they're
like
basically
edit
writing
it,
it. Like,
or
yeah, they'll edit it. At that point, they're basically writing for you because, right, at that point, they're so involved. They're not just like proofreading it for 6,000. They're pretty much developing your whole essay, and it's just sort of unfair that a lot of people, they're competing with people who are paying thousands of dollars for
yeah,
tutors, and
yeah.
people looking at it. And at some point, it's like you're not even competing with people who are accurate. They're not even accurately representing themselves. It's a fictitious image that you're competing against.
Yes, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, it's kind of the terminology that I want to use would be like basically gaming the system, like
Yeah,
understanding how the system works and trying to use it to your advantage. And that's another thing. Like there are people out there with so many resources, and it's like, how can you compare someone who doesn't have those types of resources to someone who does? Like, so what does it actually mean to be admitted to school, like a school like that? It for
yeah,
me, I don't think it means much. But we
yeah.
place such an emphasis on it as a society. And I
Yeah.
think that's very problematic.
No, it is very. And Michael Rist brings up a great point. And Ivy League and other top tier schools have one major advantage: an amazing network of.
Mm,
I will say it's an amazing network, but I will say that if you have enough EQ, you can easily replicate and make a network better on your own. I mean, it depends on your city. I will say that you'll have an advantage once you go to a non-big city. But if you're in New York City, if you go to like obviously not during the pandemic, but if you go to meetup.com, you spend a good amount of time going to networking events, you can easily replicate because having gone to the Ivy League, I have been able to, my network outside the Ivy League is actually much stronger than within because what happens is a lot of people because this is what happens, and I've seen it a lot on LinkedIn. A lot of people who went to Columbia, they'll send me sales messages just because we went to Columbia. And I find that people who don't have that, they'll actually put more effort and they'll personalize their message and they're connecting me for a reason. Whereas Columbia, they'll be like, "Hey, you want this product? I see we went to Columbia together," and that's it. And it's like, look, you don't even know if I'm right for you. So while that is true, I don't think that like there are plenty of people who have not gone to. And then at the end of the day, once you're like 30, 40, you should be having your own network, right? You in the beginning it helps you, but outside of that, you should be, creating your own network because that's a very valuable skill.
Yes. Because if you show people who you are and what you bring to the table, if you meet the right people, they won't care where you went to school. There are people out there who are very hyper focused on where did you go to school. There are people out there who are like that, but not everyone's like that. And I think this goes back to what I mentioned before, which is just like being authentic, right? Being authentic and just bringing your full self to the table.
Yeah, and yes, there are people who are very hyper focused, but you don't even want to talk to them. Like, it was funny in the workplace. Like, people really liked. I used to be. I was a work clown. Like, if there was a class clown, I was a work clown. Like, I just used to make people laugh and stuff. And just
I
like
would have enjoyed working with you.
Yeah, no, it was fun. We used to. It was like it was an actual like off, like the show The Office. That's how it was at work. With we'd just be joking around, having fun, freestyle rap battles, just making fun of each other, all that stuff. And it like I never really brought up the school. Like people would be like, "Hey, tonight," they're like, "Oh, he's like you're actually," because I worked at a different team, so they had no idea what I did. And all that stuff. And that's kind of what you want, where it's like the school is a footnote and it doesn't define you. Because if the school defines you, then you sort of not use the education to its full benefit because you are more than the school you go to. You're more than the major you major in. You are a person who brings up a lot. 100%. And the fact is, learning doesn't stop when you graduate. In fact, learning, that's when the real learning begins, right?
100%.
Real learning doesn't begin in the classroom. Real learning begins when you're out in the world and you're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, everything that you described really resonates with me. I don't actively bring up that I went to Yale because I want people to formulate their opinions about me based on our interactions or what they see me doing or our conversations together, our experiences together. But I think the times when it does come out that I went to Yale, I feel like there are immediate judgments, even if they're positive biases. But I'd much rather someone think that because of their experience of me versus just a label that they're putting on because they know that I went to this one particular school.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, employers really value that label. A lot of companies really, even investors, I was reading that, I'll post different things and someone's saying, well, investors care about, you're going to see they're just more likely to invest in these schools. And it kind of sucks because I don't think it's an accurate metric of, invest in the people, invest in the idea, invest in what they can do, right? Again, these are just footnotes. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the best idea and the best, team should win regardless of, their backgrounds.
I think it's a societal thing, right? So, I mean, when you think about college admissions, and I think they're better about it now, but like when they are looking at who to admit, like something that's easy to look at are SAT, ACT scores, right? Like, people do make judgments about like how smart or how capable someone is based on their scores, right? So then in the real world, it's like your pedigree is that basic I guess like litmus test of like, is this person capable? Is this person smart? And I feel like there's a lot for us to dismantle as a society so that people can think more openly versus making snap judgments, which are easy to make. I mean, we are humans, so we do want to come to quick conclusions. But that's definitely like food for thought and something to think about.
Yeah, no, it's hopefully we move past it. It's going to take time. And
Yeah.
because I see that we're moving in the right direction, where especially like in the past year, where colleges have charged the same tuition for Zoom licenses, right? And it kind of shows that just that there's so many there's just like something wrong with the system, because my friend was
Hmm.
telling me about this software. What it does is you pay for it, and it takes like a video of you, and it'll move your eyes and stuff, so it looks like you're on video, and it's just like slightly moving your eyes and stuff, and it just kind of crazy that it's like,
That's
at that point it's like, why are you even in school, right?
yeah.
That if you're like paying for software, and it I've seen it where a lot of professors will say, like, student, and obviously part of it's on the professor's part, like they have to make it engaging and stuff, but students also have the responsibility of making sure that they do their part, and it kind of just shows that, why should someone be valued by where they go if at the end of the day it's like they're not purpose driven.
Yeah, that goes back to the shoulds that I talked about. Like, because if those people were being on themselves, is that where they really want to be? Or is that where they feel like they should be because people in society expect everyone or most people to get 4-year degrees, right?
Yeah.
It's hard
And
for people to drop that.
yeah, and it's interesting. So, what do you like? What age do you kind of see a lot of people find their purpose? Obviously, like, it's all over the place, but what age? Because I know that there's like, I realized like a few years in, I realized it early. Well, I kind of even knew before I started work. I was like, I kind of have to work just so I can show my parents I can get a job and I'm not an idiot. And I also needed money too, right? Right. I needed like a
Yeah.
couple of years worth of, saving money and all that stuff. So what age groups do you kind of see are like common when they really start questioning that, like, hey, something's wrong, something's not like connecting?
Yeah. So I think it really runs the gamut, right? So you have people in their mid 20s, like early mid 20s, that cusp where you're going
Yeah.
through like your quarter life crisis, which I actually don't
Yeah.
like that term, but
Yeah.
that's how they coin it, right? Quarter life crisis, where you've had maybe one or two jobs out of college and you're like, wait, there's something more, right?
Yeah.
I think like late 20s, early 30s, that's also a time where people like question what it is that they're doing and what it is that they really want out of their life. And the reason why is because they think people feel like, oh, in your 20s, you can explore. And then when you hit 30, there's this like, oh, I'm 30. What does this mean? Like, what do I actually want to do? I think that's also a point. And then I also have worked with people in their 50s who are basically thinking, like, how do I want to spend the second half of my life? Or I'm done with my first career. Like, I want a career change. What do I do now? So, like, I would say that those are like three categories I see. But again, finding your purpose is a forever journey, and everyone's on a different journey, right? So you can have someone who may have been a lawyer for the last 20 years and realize, oh, wait, like, I want to do something else now. And that's just, it's again, person dependent.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
do you kind of see differences in males and females when it comes to purpose?
Um, what do you mean by that?
Like, in terms of when they become more self-aware,
Mm,
or different causes, right? Like, sometimes it's, because again,
yeah.
we just have different society expectations, different experiences, and right, that impacts how we perceive and how we take action.
Yeah. I think I don't have a very clear answer for that because I think I also bring like my own biases to the table. So I
Yeah.
do work with both women and men, right? But I also feel like I think there are generalizations about like women just being more in tune with their emotions, right?
Yeah.
Which is really helpful for a process like this, where in a society, like we say things like, men need to man up and they need to be a provider. So, like, I think there are generalizations like that, but I don't think I can concretely say, like, oh, there are differences between
Uh,
women and men aside from the generalizations.
yeah. Do you kind of see these generalizations kind of impact how they approach you?
Um,
Or do you feel that because they're self-aware that they've overcome those generalizations?
yeah, it's more of that. Yeah, because I feel like by the time, like when someone is ready for coaching, again, they recognize that something's not working and they can be honest and open about what's not working, right? And it takes a certain level of self-awareness to get to that stage. So that's why I don't really like classify it as like, oh, this is a woman, this is a man, they're operating differently. Like it doesn't register in that way for me in my head.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I mean that's good because you as a
Yeah.
coach, it's always good to sort of come impartial and focus on the end goal and all
Yeah.
that. I mean, is there
Yeah.
anything else that you sort of really want to discuss today before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, I guess my last message for what I want to share with people is that we can always reinvent ourselves. I think that this goes back to fear, right? Like I think people think like I'm too old to start something, like there's so many people out there who are already doing this, like who am I to do this? So I just want to encourage everyone and let them know that you can always reinvent yourself. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's your life. So it's so important to live authentically and do the things that you want to do because at the end of the line on your deathbed, most people, they don't regret doing things. They regret the things that they didn't
Yeah,
do,
that's
right?
so true. And
Yeah.
even to add on to that, it's that the average age of an entrepreneur is actually like above 50. It's like 53, 54 because, you need a lot of experience. So just realize that, it's in fact that if you're starting in your 40s, you're starting earlier than most people. Right.
Yeah.
And then, the fact is, and to add on to that, is that if you think about a company for phones, right, there are so many companies. If you think about companies for, Uber and Lyft, right, they do the same thing. And they have in New York City, there are like
Yes.
5 other app companies and all that. And yet they all still exist and they survive. So just realize that you don't, yes, if you want funding, if you want investors, that's a different story. But for your own life, it's definitely, if you put effort, you are strategic, you do it the right way, and if you're purpose driven, that itself is an edge because a lot of people are not purpose
Yes.
driven.
Yes. I guess to add on to what you said, like the thing is, if everyone thought like, oh, I'm not going to do this because there's someone else doing it out there, then nothing would get done. Not like no one
Nothing.
would put
Yeah.
anything out there. And I noticed a comment from Glenn. He asked, should we seek input from others before trying to reinvent ourselves? This is a really good question. So my thoughts on that question are as follows. So I think that it's helpful to seek input from the people who know you, right? So whether that's family members, whether that's friends, whether that's colleagues, right? And what I mean by that is to seek input and maybe get clarity on what they think that you're good at, because oftentimes we don't see what we're good at, right? Like we see it as like, oh yeah, like that was easy to do, but like actually those things that we find easy, other people identify as strengths within us. So I think that it's important to seek input in that sense, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel like it's up to us to make the decisions from here within our heart instead of our head. But it's helpful to get input just to see what other people think and then to really tap into our hearts. So I hope that's helpful. Glenn, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. And, to add on to that, I think we have to seek input from the right people, right? Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, they have to know us, they have to. And I think when you seek input from people who have the best intentions for you, I think that makes sense because, again, we always have blind spots, right? Because we are the most biased when it comes to ourselves, whether it's a good bias or some people it's a bad bias, right? They really downplay everything, and then
Usually
some people
negative.
are
Yeah.
just the complete opposite. And Glenn says yes. So no, thank you for answering that. Again, Angela has an offer. I'm gonna paste it in. So feel
Yes.
free to take advantage of that. If you know someone that can take advantage of that, please, send it, their way. I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you for your time. I had such an amazing time. Hold up, let me give you. So here are the giveaways that Angela's giving. I'm putting them in the chat, and thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you, Angela, again. Good luck
Yeah.
on your workshops. And
Thank
what's up,
you.
Joseph? You just came at the end, man. You missed it. You missed it all, but it's all right. Thanks for
Hi,
coming by. You
Joseph.
better. Better late than never. All right, so thank you, everyone. Have a good one, Angela.